Welcome to Birds of Prey Sports, where we cover Ravens and Orioles news weekly. I'm your host, Jared. And in this video, I'll be bringing you a list of candidates the Ravens have either requested or have already interviewed for their head coaching position. Obviously, the Ravens have probably have one of the most coveted positions in the league, if not the most coveted, that we've seen in a long while. In all seriousness, these teams that are usually looking for head coaches are teams that are coming off bet losing seasons or rebuilding teams or, teams that are just looking for somebody to coach a young team, especially if they have a young quarterback, you know, or just young star players in general. That's usually when, are considered a coveted position, but the Ravens are a team that could easily be in a contention window immediately, with talent on their team like Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Kyle Hamilton. Um, I won't say Roquan Smith, but I don't know if he's up there anymore. But there is enough star power on this team to build around, is what I should say. And I think first of all, it all starts in the trenches. Protecting your star players and making your star players' jobs easier. It's not having to be Superman, because I mean, Kyle Hamilton is virtually the Lamar Jackson of the defense, and that speaks volumes when he goes out. So, but anyways, I kind of want to, I want to get TJ's opinion on here. Obviously, I haven't had him in the video since our pregame for the Steelers game, but I want to get him in a video and ask his opinion, about the candidates we've interviewed so far. And I would imagine that this list is just going to continue to grow. I'm also going to talk a little bit about I guess you can call it drama that's just been going on with the Ravens as well. Well, really with the media. I wouldn't even say with the Ravens. It's more about, the media, but I'll get into that in a minute. But I'm going to share my screen really quick and show the candidates that so far have been interviewed or have been requested. I think my screen share now. This is from Jeff Zrebiec, Orioles reporter from The Athletic. So it says Ravens scorecard. We've interviewed two Broncos coaches, Broncos quarterback slash pass game coordinator Davis Webb, Broncos defensive coordinator Coach Vance Joseph. Um, if you're not familiar with that meme, please look it up. And we've requested for the 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh. He was just recently a coach for the New York Jets, and that didn't really work out. I believe we finished the interview today because this tweet was yesterday, but we finished the interview today with Seahawks offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. That's I'll get into how I feel about that in a second. Ex-Commanders offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury, also former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Dolphins defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. He was, I believe, a linebacker, not linebackers. I think he may have been what coach was he here? He was here in 2023 when our coaches got purged. I forgot what he coached. Was his defensive backs? I don't remember for sure. It may have been D line. I know Anthony Weaver was a defensive player. Defensive. Well, he also was a player on the team, but he also was a defensive coach in that season. But anyways, Chiefs offensive coordinator Matt Nagy and Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores. Obviously Matt Nagy, the former coach of the Bears, and Brian Flores, the former coach of the Dolphins. And I would imagine, I like this comment, no Minter down here. I would imagine that Jesse Minter gets one soon. I know we requested an interview for Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. And I would imagine that there's going to be more. Obviously, we're going to have, I don't know how many interviews we're going to necessarily do, with, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, all that stuff. I would imagine the head coach getting that guy in, and then he's going to probably bring his own staff either from that respective team or people that he knows throughout the league. That's how I imagine it would go. But for the two people that we've interviewed so far, Davis Webb, not really sure much about him. I do know Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. He was the head coach at a point, when that stint after Peyton Manning had retired, where the Broncos weren't really doing anything. I believe he was let go or demoted. I mean, he's on the Broncos now, so I would imagine he was either let go and brought back as a defensive coordinator. I don't remember for sure. But I'm not really too hot on those first two guys that we've interviewed so far. But the guy that we did interview today that I am hot on is Seahawks offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. That is a guy that I am clamoring for probably the most. If I had to, rank my excitement for each one of these guys, Clint Kubiak would either be number one or 1A. Um, um, that is a guy who I think can unlock the offense. I've kind of clamored for an offensive minded head coach on our last video. Well, the one before, I think it was either before Harbaugh was fired or that video that I had filmed. But I think that Clint Kubiak would be the hire that I would make personally. Without, if you told me you had to hire one of these guys, without interviewing them, I'd say Clint Kubiak just because of his offensive mind. But obviously there's more that goes into it outside of knowing just the X's and O's. Robert Saleh, obviously he had that stint with the Jets that didn't go very well. But what stint really goes well with the Jets in all seriousness? So I don't know how seriously to take that. Haven't heard anything really negative about him, but I'm just not on board with it as much as because he's a defensive coordinator. Cliff Kingsbury, I'm gonna have to say no on this one personally. I know that they're probably just reaching out, and doing different interviews or questioning different guys or whatever, but just to widen their search. But he didn't last in Arizona very long, and when he did make the playoffs, the one year they got clobbered by the Rams, the year they won the Super Bowl. So, um, I'm gonna have to say no on that. I'm also gonna say no on Anthony Weaver, and honestly, the next two guys, Weaver and Nagy, I would say that those are both no's. Anthony Weaver, I think, is just too not similar to Harbaugh, but too connected, I guess you could say. I'd really want something disconnected. I know Kubiak's probably, maybe connected in a way just because of his father being the offensive coordinator here, but I don't think Clint Kubiak was here exactly. I don't know if he was coaching here or in the NFL yet, but I think he was with his dad mostly at first, Gary Kubiak, at first when he first started out. But Anthony Weaver, I'm gonna have to say no. And Nagy, no, just no. But Brian Flores is an interesting one. I know I was clamoring for, a defensive head coach. An offensive head coach, but that's an interesting one just because, I heard a lot of things about him, where he's maybe a little bit, too controlling, maybe possibly. I don't know exactly how much I buy into that. I know that he had that lawsuit with the NFL. And I think the Dolphins were trying to pay him more to tank, and he didn't want to tank, and that went against the best wishes of the owner and GM of the Dolphins at the time. And um, I believe he also did not want Tua Tagovailoa as his quarterback, and they kind of went against his wishes as well there. So I will say that that's an interesting one because his desire to win seems to be greater than anything that could be financial. Not that the Ravens were ever going to tank or anything, but I think that speaks volumes to his character and you know, um, his motive to win, I guess you could say. He doesn't want to lose, and he never wants to lose. And that's something that I think is a little bit inspiring, I guess, in a way, So that's one of the defensive coaches I want. Jesse Minter is also another one that's been interesting. It could be like a righting a wrong, with not getting McDonald. Obviously, I would have loved McDonald to be our head coach. I know that kind of goes against what I said with the defensive, coordinator or not wanting a defensive minded head coach, but I mean, Mike Mack's defenses were undeniably great. So, that's something that and he seems like a great leader of men. So that's another thing. And that's what I wanted to add on earlier, just because I'm clamoring for Clint Kubiak as, the X and O's guy who I think could help the offense grow and evolve into something more. Um, is he a good leader though? That's the question of the day. Obviously we're not going to know because I'm not a Seahawks fan and I'm not in that locker room. Even a Seahawks fan, they're not in that locker room either, So it's just, they don't know for sure how, much he can he's a good of a leader. Maybe he can lead a few group of guys like the quarterbacks, some receivers and the offense in general, but the whole team, is a whole different story. And really the whole organization as a whole, just being a front page, leader of the group, is easier said than done. So that's also another thing. If these guys, we know what their product is on the field, but what is their product off the field? So that's something that it's interesting, and that if we can get more information on that, that'd be great. But I've heard good things about Kubiak when it comes to being a leader of men, possibly, and I don't know about how reliable sources there are, about that, but if he is, then that would be my number one pick as head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, and obviously he can bring in his staff. And I say that I want an offensive coordinator just because, I'm tired of, having to learn new offenses, if when it's working and then becomes stale, like, you know, I'd rather just have one guy, have his offense, have the offensive coordinator kind of just be there, calling plays or whatever, and but have it to be one guy's offense, Clint Kubiak's offense. And, I don't know, I want a guy that lives and breathes football, and a guy who's not just trying to fix the weaknesses, but even improve your strengths. That those are two things that I want to see in our next coach. And I think that that's where Harbaugh lacked, personally. I don't know Harbaugh, in the locker room as much, but he didn't seem to be a strategist. He did seem to be a good leader of men at points, but, to actually be on the game day strategy list as one of the top coaches, he just wasn't. He's not the guy with the playbook in hand, during the game or calling plays or whatever. He's not like that. So and every coach is different, but having a guy that's hands on could be good. Especially since if Clint Kubiak's on the sideline calling plays and him and Lamar have good, connection with each other, he's going to be there. He's not going to be in the booth. He's not going to be up in the skybox, watching the game. He's going to be on the field and being like, yeah, Lamar, like, I'm seeing this. Maybe you're not seeing this, or maybe you're seeing it. Maybe I'm not, or whatever. It's just having that, that connection and that one-to-one conversation on the sideline, I think is going to be huge as well. Obviously, if they build connection, I mean, our next hire could be a disaster. Clint Kubiak could be a disaster for all we know, which I don't want to speak on that. Hopefully it's not. I hope that he is our head coach personally, but I think maybe an offensive minded head coach could speak volumes because Lamar Jackson's a smart guy when it comes to, when it comes to football. And really when it comes, I mean, he's a smart guy in general outside of football, but his football IQ is one of the best, and is not really talked about enough with the media or people in general. He's just such a smart football player, and you know, obviously he has his moments, but what player doesn't have their moments of, of blunders or whatever. So Lamar Jackson's a smart football player. He really knows the game of football. He seems to live and breathe football as well, just as much as some of these people, more than some of these people, I should say, even. And to have that, maybe their, football connection can just be a strong bond, that they can grow and win a lot with, because I think no matter what coach is going to be there, Lamar's going to do his best to win ball games. But I mean, when we're talking about Super Bowls, that's when the connection needs to be strong. When those two, come into conflict, or when those two want to do something more or grow. And that's another thing. It just feels like Lamar grew out of too many offenses with the Ravens, and it's like we need a system that's going to grow with him and not have him grow out of it. And I don't know how much he grew out of Todd Monken's offense. It just seemed like maybe, there was just, I mean, obviously the offensive line was pretty poor. As much as Louis Riddick on ESPN wants to say that our offensive line was top 10 in the league, it just wasn't. Let's just stop lying. We all have eyes. We watch every snap of this damn football team. We knew that this offensive line was not good, so if anybody tells you otherwise, they either just don't watch Ravens football or they just don't know football. And I think that you shouldn't be working at ESPN if you don't know football like that. If you want to lie to us and say that our offensive line did good. So don't lie to us like that. But yeah, I'm not a fan of Joe Brady either. I'm not really a fan of Buffalo's offense in general. Um, I do wonder where Harbaugh is going to wind up going. I know the Dolphins just fired Mike McDaniel, and that was kind of surprising just because he wasn't expected to be fired. So maybe that's them opening up the position so Harbaugh can come in. I know they just hired a GM today from the Packers organization, and the Packers are a pretty well-run organization for the most part. Obviously, they are. I think they won like the very, very first Super Bowl. They haven't been to the Super Bowl since 2010, where they did beat the Steelers. But I mean, they still have been contending for Super Bowls for a majority of my lifetime, really. So, but anyways, I kind of want to get into what I was talking about earlier with the drama of in the Ravens facility or whatever, where different reports are coming out about possibly why Harbaugh was fired. I heard Harbaugh was fired because of wanting to keep Monken on board and keeping the same staff in general and running it back with minor tweaks. And Bisciotti probably didn't like that, and he wanted to move on because the firing definitely did seem to shock people. In really the media or maybe even in the clubhouse as well, or in the locker room. And I don't know, maybe people were trying to say that Lamar and Todd Monken didn't have a good relationship, but Monken and Lamar have both debunked that. And until proven otherwise, you kind of have to believe those two guys when they're talking about their relationship. I mean, Monken even mentioned yesterday on Ryan Ripken's show that the relationship could have been better at points. And I mean, of course, every relationship can be better at points. I mean, that's the point of relationships is to grow and to mature and whatever. But they've only been together 3 years. It's not like they've been together 20 years or whatever, together as offensive coordinator quarterback. They've been, working together for the last 3 seasons. And this year was obviously frustrating. And I could imagine, there could be possible frustration, with the offense. The offense definitely seemed to be different when Lamar was out. Ran different, ran a little bit, maybe more effectively, but I'm not entirely sure what to think about this, because Ian Rappaport's saying that, maybe Harbaugh lost the locker room. Adam Schefter's saying absolutely not. That players were crying when he got fired, which I don't really believe that. I think Adam Schefter's just one of those guys who he needs his sources and he wants his scoops and he's gonna make some stuff up maybe or bend the truth a little bit to an extreme to pander to people like Harbaugh and his PR, so because Harbaugh has PR, and so just like Lamar has PR, but it's not as represented. It's not as public as people probably would like it, but it will do damage control if it needs to, which it has been. Lamar Jackson Entertainment on Twitter has been debunking a lot of things, because people like to think that they know Lamar Jackson. And I, for one, will never come on here assuming what Lamar thinks or what Lamar could possibly say just because I don't know him like that. I know him as a football player and as a dude off the field sometimes, with his charity work or whatever when he does little events in Florida. But like, I don't know Lamar Jackson. I've never talked to the guy, so and I especially don't work with him, on in the facility. So I don't know what goes on in there. But I would imagine Lamar Jackson's a strictly professional guy when it comes to football, outside of when he's having fun, but whether he's doesn't like something, I just wouldn't see him as the guy who would just like be pissed or hate a guy because they don't see eye to eye on things, But I mean, who am I to say, I think Adam Schefter is just full of BS. I believe the Ian Rappaport report um, more than I believe Schefter's, where he lost locker room. I don't know to what scale he lost the locker room to. It definitely seemed like a lot of players were dejected. It seemed like a lot of coaches were dejected, and Harbaugh himself seemed dejected. And I just think that it was a necessary change for both. If Harbaugh wants to continue his career and still be considered a great coach, I think it was just a good time to move on. And, obviously, plenty of people are going to celebrate. People are going to be upset. People are going to be happy. People are going to be sad, mad, whatever. Everyone deserves their own reaction. But I want everyone to collectively at least come together and just acknowledge that this needed to be done. And you know, I think I don't want to bash on him or anything, but I think people are overrating Harbaugh just a little bit. I mean, obviously, being in the league 18 years is impressive enough. And, he did good jobs at certain points, obviously, and he led us, well, I don't want to say he led us to the Super Bowl. I think as a collective unit, we came together and we led the whole team together. Went to the Super Bowl. I don't want to say it was because of Harbaugh, but I think the years 2013 through 2018 really kind of spelled what Harbaugh maybe truly is as a coach when he's not given certain talents or whatever, because we were just kind of mid in that time span. But I also can't fully blame him because the team were pretty poor and old. But you know, that's not a conversation we need to have anymore because we're looking for a new head coach. So I appreciate everything he's done for the Ravens, and I hope that he finds success, and I hope that we find even more success. So, anyways, that's kind of my thoughts about that report. Monken and Lamar cleared it up. So, I mean, there really is no reason to talk about it anymore besides that, because those two guys, if they say what they say goes. So, and Monken and Lamar are both straightforward people. So, I have no reason not to believe those two. So, but anyways, that'll probably be on this video. I just want to talk about, the coaching candidates we've interviewed and that little beef that's been happening on social media about that stuff and give my 2 cents on it, which wasn't much, but I just wanted to talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Comment down below what head coach you want on the Ravens next season, if it's Clint Kubiak or if it's somebody else that we haven't interviewed or requested yet. Let me know. Don't forget to check out our second channel, Casual Cinema. Oh, if you're also mentioned all our social, I think I said all our social media links are in the description below, but if not, they are linked down below. They can't pop up here because it's just my face today, but if when it's us two, they'll be down the bottom here. So make sure you check those out. Got content on there, and our Bird Spray Sports from around.